Kelvin Cortez was born into wealth most people only see on magazine covers. But when he rejected an arranged marriage and chose love over legacy, his family erased him from their world. Now broke, alone, and rebuilding from scratch, Kelvin hides in plain sight as a college student scraping by. But everything changes the night he walks into an abandoned beach to find his classmate Lillian being attacked by 3 powerful trust fund bullies, led by the arrogant and dangerous Brandon Wexler. When Kelvin steps in, he's nearly killed, until a Black Ops helicopter swoops in to rescue him, revealing a truth no one saw coming. Kelvin isn't just anyone. He's a Cortez. And the world just remembered. The fallout is immediate. Viral headlines, jealous enemies, and his growing romance with Deborah, a brilliant, principled girl who had no idea who Kelvin really was. But as love blossoms, their lives spiral into scandal, sabotage, and betrayal. A fake fraud scheme implicates Kelvin. A smear campaign paints Deborah as a manipulative gold digger. And behind it all, a ghost from her past, her estranged father, pulling strings alongside powerful figures within the Cortez empire. With reputations shattered and secrets weaponized, Kelvin and Deborah must decide. Can love survive a world built to crush it? Or will they rewrite the rules themselves? Like, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification. Nice try, Cinderella. But your night's not coming. That was Brandon Wexler's idea of humor as he yanked Lillian by the wrist, dragging her closer to the jagged rocks lining the old beach. His voice was smug, slurred with power, and it echoed off the abandoned lifeguard station like a threat painted in sound. Lillian's scream was muffled by the crashing waves, her arms flailing as she fought against Brandon and his crew, Preston and Malik. 2 boys who thought rich and rotten was a personality type worth celebrating. Her dress was torn at the shoulder. Her knees scraped from the fall. Her voice trembled but didn't break. "Get off me," she shouted, her eyes darting toward the horizon, praying anyone would appear. And someone did. Kelvin Cortez was already sprinting across the sand, sneakers barely gripping the slope as he raced toward the chaos. His shirt stuck to his chest from sweat and panic. His breath came fast, not just from running, but from what he saw. Not Deborah, but Lillian. And she was in trouble. "Hey, step away from her," Kelvin roared. Brandon didn't even flinch. He turned around with the swagger of a drunk lion guarding stolen meat. Well, look who finally crawled out from under his student loan. Kelvin didn't respond. His fists did. The punch landed square on Malik's jaw, sending him stumbling back like a malfunctioning bobblehead. Preston lunged at Kelvin, but Kelvin ducked, grabbed a fistful of sand, and threw it in his face. Brandon hit Kelvin hard. He fell to the ground. He couldn't feel the blood anymore. Just the sand grinding against his face, and the sharp throb in his ribs where the boot had landed a few seconds ago. The waves crashed behind him, loud and furious, but not loud enough to drown the sound of Lillian's scream. "Get your hands off her," Kelvin shouted, voice hoarse, struggling to push himself off the ground. Laughter, ugly and careless, cut through the wind. Brandon Wexler stood above him, gun in hand, shirt half-torn, his friends circling behind like a pack of wolves. The coastal wind tugged at his messy blonde hair, his lip curled in a smug half-smile. Lillian scrambled to her feet and backed away as Brandon raised his arm, gun in hand, lips twisted into a sneer. Lillian sobbed harder, curled up by the rocks. Her dress was ripped at the shoulder. Her wrists were bruised from where the others had grabbed her. Kelvin dragged himself upright, his knuckles bleeding, one eye swollen. "If you touch her again, I swear." "You'll what?" "You're nothing now. Just another poor dirty." "You should have stayed in your lane, Kelvin. You're a joke. You think people like us ever lose." He raised the gun. The barrel pointed straight at Kelvin's chest. Lillian screamed. Kelvin took the distraction. He lunged. Fists flew. Sand kicked up. Screams echoed. One of Brandon's goons tried to pull Kelvin back, but caught a punch to the jaw instead. Another tackled him from behind, slamming him hard into the sand. Kelvin groaned but twisted out, grabbing a piece of driftwood and swinging wildly. Brandon stumbled, recovered, raised the gun again. "Enough," he shouted. Everyone froze. The wind seemed to pause with them. Kelvin didn't move. Couldn't. He just stared into the black hole of the gun, breath caught in his throat. Then it happened. A deep womp 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 began echoing from the skies. At first, no one noticed. Then the wind picked up violently. The sand swirled. The waves crashed harder. Brandon flinched and looked up. A helicopter. Sleek. Black. Approaching fast. "What the hell?" Preston muttered, squinting up with sandy eyes. Then came the red beams, 2 of them, dancing across Brandon's chest like a silent countdown. "Drop it!" A voice thundered from above, mechanical and cold. Brandon froze. Too slow. Crack! A single shot. The gun flew from his hand, clattering to the sand as Brandon howled, falling to his knees, clutching his fingers like they owed him money. Lillian screamed again and ducked behind a rock. Kelvin blinked, stunned, still alive, the world whirling around him like a blender on turbo. The chopper descended, blades kicking up a hurricane of sand. From the belly of the machine, a side panel slid open with a mechanical hiss. 6 figures leapt out. Black tactical gear. Rifles aimed. Movements sharp and precise like a Navy SEAL ad with no music. On the ground. "Hands behind your head," one barked. Brandon and his friends scattered like cockroaches in a kitchen light, but the men in black moved faster. 2 tackled Preston mid-run. Malik tripped on a beach chair and got smothered by boots. Brandon was already on the sand, sniveling and yelling something about allergies and self-defense. One of the men approached Kelvin, helmet mask up, rifle lowered but still alert. "Kelvin Cortez?" he asked through the mic. Kelvin, still catching his breath, nodded. "You're secured. You're coming with us. Medical's on standby." Kelvin frowned. "I what? Who sent you?" The man leaned in. "Your grandfather." Kelvin's stomach dropped like a floor trap in a villain's lair. He hadn't heard that name in months. Not since he packed his things, walked out of the Cortez estate, and rejected the arranged bride with a diamond smile and an investment portfolio for a dowry. "I didn't ask for help," Kelvin muttered. "Didn't matter," the man replied. "He said to intervene only if your life was in danger. Tonight, you almost died." Another masked man helped Lillian to her feet and escorted her to the helicopter. She limped, but her grip on the soldier's arm was steady. Her eyes met Kelvin's for a brief second, grateful, shaken, but not broken. As 2 men guided Lillian to safety, Kelvin found himself being helped into the chopper, still dazed, still tasting blood in his mouth. As the doors closed and the beach disappeared beneath them, he looked out the window. The last thing he saw was Brandon, on his knees in the sand, crying, wrists cuffed, screaming something no one could hear. Kelvin didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just watched as the sky swallowed the scene. And Kelvin knew this wasn't rescue. The past he thought would never catch up with him finally roared in on rotor blades. He wasn't just a broke college kid anymore. He was a Cortez. And someone just rang the family bell. As the chopper lifted off, swallowing the beach in dust and wind, Kelvin sat back against the cool leather seat, eyes fixed on the horizon. Lillian held a blanket over her shoulders across from him, too stunned to speak. They didn't need words. Tonight wasn't just a rescue. It was a declaration. Someone was sending a message. You're not alone. And the game just changed. You ever seen someone look like a billionaire and a broken piñata at the same time? That was the first thing the driver muttered under his breath when Kelvin was helped into the black SUV, his eyes swollen but unblinking. The masked man who escorted him didn't laugh, but the slight twitch of his lip suggested he wanted to. Kelvin didn't care. He sat in the back seat in silence, legs stretched out, the weight of everything hitting him like aftershock waves. The beach. The fight. The gun. Brandon. The helicopter. The fact that his grandfather, the man who hadn't spoken to him since he defied the family's golden rule, had been watching all along. The world outside blurred into a dark tunnel as the vehicle moved through private roads, hills, and high walls that whispered, "This is not for the public." Then came the facility. The whir of the helicopter blades had long faded, but the sound still echoed in Kelvin's ears as the black SUV pulled up to the private hospital. It wasn't a typical building. It looked more like a 5-star resort carved into a mountainside. The white marble facade gleamed under the moonlight, and the courtyard was so quiet, so perfectly landscaped, it felt like the trees themselves had signed a non-disclosure agreement. The guards at the gate didn't check IDs. They recognized the vehicle, the seal on the door, and that was enough. Kelvin hadn't said a word since they lifted off from the beach. Not when they stitched the cut above his eyebrow mid-flight. Not when they scanned his face to activate the biometric locks. Not even when the medic whispered, "Welcome back, sir," with the kind of cautious respect reserved for returning royalty. He was clean now, washed, bandaged, wrapped in a crisp white shirt and dark pants that weren't his but somehow fit perfectly. His hands still trembled. Not from fear anymore. From not knowing what came next. As he stepped through the lobby doors, he expected the sterile chill of a hospital. But this place smelled of sandalwood and citrus. Jazz played softly from hidden speakers. A wall-sized aquarium cast blue light across the polished floors. Somewhere in the distance, water trickled from an indoor fountain. A woman in a navy blue suit approached. Tall, straight-backed, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Cortez," she said with a nod. "I'm Dr. Alara Quinn. I'll be overseeing your recovery." He blinked, as if remembering how to respond. "I'm not sick." "Not physically, no," she replied, turning on her heel. "But your life is." Kelvin followed without a word. She walked him down a silent corridor with sound-absorbing walls and motion-activated lighting. It felt like moving through a cocoon made for secrets. "This place is excessive," he muttered. Dr. Quinn arched an eyebrow. "Excessive is relative. For some, it's a yacht. For others, it's safety. And for me," she stopped and looked at him. "For you, it's a fork in the road." The door at the end of the hall opened with a soft whoosh. His suite was enormous, easily the size of 3 apartments. Sleek furniture, a wall-sized screen, a minibar that looked like it served trust funds instead of drinks. And yet it felt cold. Not temperature-wise, soul-wise. He walked to the window. Outside, moonlight spilled across the stone paths winding through a zen garden. Wind rustled tall bamboo hedges. Somewhere out there, rich men in silence and silk robes probably whispered about the future over herbal tea. Kelvin didn't care about any of it. "Where's Lillian?" he asked. "She's safe," Dr. Quinn said. "And under observation." "And Deborah?" There was a pause. "Too long." "We're still tracking her location," she answered calmly. "But we have people on it. And believe me, Mr. Cortez, people like us don't stay missing for long." Kelvin turned, jaw tightening. "She's not people like us. That's the whole damn point." Dr. Quinn regarded him for a moment, then nodded as if filing away that piece of truth. "There are clothes in the closet, food in the warmer. If you need anything, press the call pad. I suggest rest, but I'm guessing you won't listen." "You're right." She was already halfway out the door when she added, "Then at least eat. You'll need strength for the storm ahead." The door hissed closed, and Kelvin stood there, alone in a palace of privilege, feeling more like an outsider than ever. The night passed with no rest. Kelvin sat at the glass table near the fireplace, flipping through files that had been quietly slid under his door. Incident reports, college transcripts, surveillance stills. His own face appeared in blurry images from street corners, fast food counters, security gates. He wasn't being watched. He was being studied. The Cortez family didn't do casual concern. They did full-spectrum containment. He stared at one image for a long time. It was Deborah, leaning against a lamppost, laughing, her hair loose in the wind, a milkshake in one hand, his jacket draped over her shoulder. She had no idea someone had taken that photo. No idea someone had been watching. He clenched his jaw, then threw the file aside. The knock on the door came just before sunrise. A soft rap, too polite for security, too confident for staff. Kelvin opened it. Standing there in a charcoal suit, collar open, no tie, was a man he hadn't seen in over a year. "Still not dead, I see," the man said casually. Kelvin stared. "Uncle Darius?" In the flesh. The better dressed, less judgmental branch of the family tree. Kelvin hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in. Try not to redecorate." Darius Cortez strolled in like he owned the floor. He picked up a piece of fruit from the counter, bit into it, chewed thoughtfully, then gestured around the room. "They really went all out. Last time I stayed here, the walls were beige. Depressing. Glad you got the upgrade." Kelvin leaned against the wall. "What are you doing here?" Darius's tone shifted just slightly. "I came because grandfather said this might be the moment." "The moment for what?" "For you to stop playing poor and start acting like a Cortez." Kelvin's laughter was short and bitter. "Is that what this is? A recruitment drive? More like damage control. Your little beach brawl nearly made the wrong headlines. If we hadn't intervened, I'd be dead." "Yeah, I got the memo." Darius tossed the half-eaten fruit onto a gold-plated tray. "Look, I know we haven't always seen eye to eye. You mean because I didn't want to marry some corporate princess and become another cog in the family machine?" Darius shrugged. "We've all made sacrifices." Kelvin stepped forward, voice tight. "They tried to ruin me, Darius. Cut me off. Blacklist me. I couldn't get a job scrubbing toilets without someone pulling strings to make sure I failed. And yet here you are. Alive. Strong. Smarter." Kelvin pointed a finger. "Don't spin this. They tried to break me. Darius's face hardened. Because they had to. You think walking away was brave? It was stupid. It made you a target. And now look, Deborah's gone. Lillian was almost. He stopped himself. This isn't a game. Kelvin's voice dropped. I never treated it like one. Silence stretched. Finally, Darius sighed. They want to see you. Grandfather. Your mother. Even Gregory. They want to talk. Kelvin turned his back. Tell them to wait. For how long? He stared out the window again. Until I find her. Darius hesitated. And what then? Kelvin didn't answer. Because the truth was he didn't know. The call came just after noon. Lillian. Kelvin nearly tripped over himself answering the secure line. Her voice was scratchy, tired. But alive. I'm okay, she whispered. Sore. But okay. Kelvin exhaled. Thank God. I was losing my mind. I heard what happened. That helicopter thing. Kelvin, who are you? He sat down, gripping the edge of the desk. I was going to tell you and Deborah. I wanted to be someone without the Cortez, and Lillian didn't answer right away. Then she said, Deborah would understand. She's scared right now. Have you heard from her? No. But I saw something. The guy who grabbed me at the beach? He had a tattoo. Same one I saw on the man who came to her dorm a week ago. I thought it was nothing. Now I'm not so sure. Headed inside and opened the secured family line. Connect me to grandfather, he said into the console. And tell him I'm ready to talk. But what Kelvin didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Deborah's disappearance wasn't just a kidnapping. It was a betrayal. And the person behind it was someone already inside the Cortez circle. If anyone asks, just tell them I was mugged by a hurricane in designer boots. That was Kelvin's way of explaining his condition as he stepped into the Cortez estate's grand hall the next morning. Bruised eye, stiff shoulder, and a walk that screamed, "My ribs hate me." The guards at the front didn't laugh, of course. They weren't paid to laugh. They were paid to assess threats, look sharp in black suits, and pretend they hadn't watched Kelvin grow up making fart noises in the pool. Inside, everything looked exactly the same, like someone had pressed pause on a billionaire's lifestyle 2 years ago and never unpaused it. Marble floors so polished they could blind a crow. Oil paintings that cost more than tuition. A chandelier that could squash a car. Kelvin felt like a time traveler. Except the past wasn't ancient, it was personal. And right now it was waiting for him in the study. He reached the tall oak doors, hesitated, then pushed them open. Inside sat 3 people who had shaped his world. Gregory Cortez, his father, still sharp-jawed, still in a charcoal suit, still looking like he was preparing to fire half a boardroom before breakfast. Eleanor Cortez, his mother, flawless, composed, wearing pearls and a smile so thin it could slice glass. And at the head of the room, Ambrose Cortez. Grandfather. The man who built the empire from a single warehouse and a dream. Kelvin entered. No one stood. Grandfather spoke first. You've grown. Getting punched in the ribs builds character, Kelvin replied dryly. His mother didn't flinch. His father raised one eyebrow, as if silently asking, Is sarcasm your opening strategy? Kelvin walked in and took the lone seat opposite them. He didn't slouch. He didn't posture. He just sat upright, jaw set, gaze steady. It was the only way to survive a Cortez meeting, like a lion tamer at a family dinner. I assume this is about Deborah, he said. Grandfather nodded. Partly. She's missing. Someone took her. I need your help. Already in motion, Gregory said. Your friend Lillian's testimony confirmed a match on the tattoo. We've dispatched private investigators. Not hired goons. Kelvin smirked. His mother leaned forward slightly. Kelvin, we're not criminals. We're Cortez. We don't hire thugs. We hire closers. That almost made Kelvin laugh. Almost. Grandfather steepled his fingers. You walked away from all this, Kelvin. From family, from legacy, from the protections that came with our name. Because you tried to marry me off like I was a strategic merger. Eleanor exhaled through her nose, slow and cold. She was perfect for you. No, Kelvin said firmly. She was perfect for you. Silence thickened. Then grandfather spoke again. And yet, despite your rejection, despite your exile, I sent the team. I saved your life. Kelvin met his eyes. And I didn't ask for it. No, the old man said. But you're my grandson. And this family doesn't abandon its own forever. Something cracked, just slightly, in Kelvin's armor. He swallowed, nodded once. Then help me find Deborah, he said. She doesn't know anything about this life. About me being this. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. She doesn't know? No, Kelvin admitted. She thinks I'm just some guy who spills smoothies for a living. Gregory leaned back, fingers steepled. And yet she still stayed? Yes. Then she might be the smartest one here, Gregory said quietly. That caught Kelvin off guard. His father rarely gave compliments, especially with actual feeling behind them. Ambrose tapped the table. We'll find her. But you need to return. Fully. Publicly. Kelvin stiffened. You mean come back home? I mean come back into the family. The estate. The meetings. The name. Kelvin stood, fists clenched. I'll come back. But not for the suits. Not for the inheritance. I'm doing this for her. Grandfather smiled. Just a little. That's why you're ready. Later that day, Kelvin sat on the edge of the estate's private balcony with a glass of cold lemonade in hand, wearing a fresh white shirt and feeling like he'd just walked out of someone else's movie. Darius plopped beside him, holding a ridiculous umbrella drink he absolutely didn't need. Congrats, Darius said. You survived the Dragon Den and came out with your eyebrows intact. I feel like I just signed a blood pact. Nah, Darius said. Just a rebranding agreement. Kelvin chuckled softly. Why does this all feel like a trap? Because this place is a trap, Darius replied. But sometimes the cage has a really nice minibar. Kelvin glanced out over the garden. I just want her back. Darius grew serious. You will. We've got eyes everywhere. And money makes the world spin faster. But what if I'm too late? Darius looked at him, eyes steady. Then we raise hell until the universe apologizes. Back at the private hospital, Lillian paced the quiet corridor like a caged cat. She had bruises on her arms, bandages on her knees, and rage bubbling just under her skin. Every doctor had told her to rest. She told them to rest in pieces. I can't just sit here, she snapped at a nurse. My best friend is out there, and Kelvin's probably halfway to a nervous breakdown. The nurse blinked. Would you like more tea? I'd like a helicopter, Lillian snapped. Or a flamethrower. Or at least a crowbar and a ride. The door behind her opened, and in walked someone unexpected. Lillian froze. It was Serena Lancaster, Brandon's older sister, and she looked guilty. Hey, Serena said quietly. Lillian's fists clenched. You've got some nerve. I didn't come to fight, Serena said. I came to talk. Oh, that's rich, Lillian snapped. Your brother tried to. I know. And I'm sorry. For all of it. Lillian stared at her. Why now? Serena looked down. Because I think I know where they took Deborah. The room went still. What? Serena reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. There's a cabin. Not far from the lake. Our dad used to use it when he needed people to disappear quietly. You're telling me this now? Serena nodded. Because I'm done protecting monsters. Lillian snatched the paper, heart pounding. You better not be lying. I'm not. And for the first time in a long time, Serena looked like someone trying to earn back her soul. That night, Kelvin stood in the war room of the Cortez estate. Surrounded by maps, screens, and staff with clipboards, he pointed at the cabin Lillian had just sent coordinates for. Send a team, he said. Quiet. Fast. They'll be there in 20 minutes, his grandfather confirmed. Kelvin turned to Darius. I'm going too. Darius grinned. Thought you'd never say that. As they suited up and headed toward the armored SUV, Kelvin caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. Hair combed. Eyes focused. Dressed in Cortez black. No longer invisible. No longer a poor college kid. Now, he was the storm. And if Deborah was at that cabin, someone was about to regret ever touching her. Okay, before we raid a cabin in the woods like action heroes, I need to say this out loud. This is a bad idea. Darius Cortez didn't usually complain. He'd once hiked through a rainstorm in a three-piece suit just to avoid media attention. But tonight, sitting in the back seat of an armored SUV with body armor strapped to his chest and a headset jammed in one ear, even he had limits. Kelvin, sitting beside him, didn't blink. Your point? My point is, Darius continued, people who disappear girls in the woods don't usually offer tea and muffins. Kelvin zipped up the sleek tactical jacket handed to him by the driver. Good. I'm allergic to muffins anyway. You're allergic to common sense, Darius muttered. The driver, a man built like a vending machine, cleared his throat. ETA 5 minutes. We're going in quiet unless given reason to do otherwise. Kelvin nodded. She better be there. She will be, Darius said, suddenly more serious. You know how I know? Because this place reeks of the kind of cowardice rich boys inherit. They don't get their hands dirty. They rent places where no one asks questions. And tonight, Kelvin added, tightening the straps on his gear, we're giving them all the answers. The SUV turned off the main road and rumbled down a narrow gravel path that wound through a dense forest. Pine trees stretched up like spires in a cathedral of silence. The moon overhead was full, casting silver over everything. And then they saw it. The cabin. It wasn't large. Just a two-story wooden structure tucked between the trees, dark and quiet except for a faint flicker of light in one of the windows. A black car, low, sleek, and far too expensive for a place like this, sat parked outside. Kelvin's chest tightened. He knew that car. It belonged to Jeremy O'Neill. The same Jeremy who'd smirked through student council meetings like he owned the world. The same Jeremy who once told Deborah she was too plain to be seen at the alumni gala. And apparently, the same Jeremy who'd orchestrated her disappearance. The SUV stopped. The driver nodded once. We go in. 2 in the front, 2 in the rear. Sir, he looked at Kelvin. We'll cover you, but this mission's yours. Kelvin stepped out onto the gravel, boots crunching. Darius followed, now silent. As they crept closer, Kelvin's heart beat faster, not from fear, but fury. He didn't knock. He kicked the door open. It slammed against the wall with a crash. Inside, the cabin looked deceptively cozy. A fire crackled in the hearth. Leather chairs, fur rugs, a decanter of whiskey on a glass table. And on the couch, Jeremy. Feet up. Phone in hand. About time, he said without looking up. I was wondering when your little family SWAT team would get the address. Kelvin stepped forward. Where is she? Jeremy smirked and finally looked up. Relax. She's alive. Can't say the same for your taste in fashion, though. Darius moved fast. One hand grabbed Jeremy by the collar, yanking him up with surprising strength. You have 10 seconds, he growled, before I stop pretending I care about legal boundaries. Jeremy laughed. You think I'm scared of you? My dad sits on 3 university boards and just got invited to the World Economic Forum. Darius tilted his head. Cool. I once made a CEO cry during a dinner toast. Want to see if I can beat that record? Kelvin wasn't listening anymore. He had already spotted the hallway. A small door. Faint light. He ran. Pushed it open. And there she was. Deborah. Tied to a chair, her face bruised, hair tangled, but her eyes were sharp, locked onto him the moment he entered. Kelvin, she breathed. He dropped to his knees and cut the ropes with the knife a guard tossed him seconds later. I'm here, he said, hands trembling. I'm here. I got you. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing silently against his shoulder. I thought they were going to. You're safe now, he whispered. I swear you're safe. Footsteps behind him. Darius appeared in the doorway, nodding. We're clear. Jeremy's zip-tied and whining like a toddler with a juice box addiction. Kelvin picked Deborah up, cradling her in his arms. Let's get out of here. The ride back was silent, but the silence was different this time. Kelvin sat beside Deborah, one arm around her shoulders as she rested against him. Her eyes were closed, but her breathing was calm. He looked at her, really looked, and something inside him cracked wide open. Not because she was broken, but because even now, even after what she'd been through, she was still whole. Still her. Still the girl who never cared about money or names or inheritance. Just him. And he had almost lost her. He'd never forgive himself for that. But he would make sure it never happened again. Back at the private hospital, doctors swept Deborah away for a full evaluation. Kelvin stood outside the door for hours, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Lillian arrived not long after, limping but determined, and hugged him tighter than anyone had in months. She's alive, she whispered. Thank God. She's alive. Kelvin nodded. I know. Later that night, after the doctors finally let him see her, he stepped into Deborah's room and froze. She was sitting up, sipping warm tea, wearing one of those oversized robes the hospital provided to people who had survived hell and still managed to look like royalty. Her face lit up when she saw him. I was starting to think you were a figment of my trauma, she said softly. Kelvin chuckled and sat beside her. I'm very real. Trust me. I stubbed my toe on the way in. She reached out and took his hand. You came. Always. And that helicopter thing, she teased. That was dramatic. He grinned. It was either that or parachute in through the ceiling. I went with the modest option. They sat in silence for a moment. Then she said, You lied to me. Kelvin's smile faded. I did. I thought you were just, poor. I was. She raised an eyebrow. I mean, Kelvin said, I was disowned. Stripped of every cent, every card, every privilege. I was living on instant noodles and dollar store shampoo. You saw the real me. That wasn't fake. But your name was. He nodded. I just wanted to be someone on my own terms. She studied him. And now, I want to be someone who deserves you. With or without the Cortez name. Deborah smiled gently. You already are. He blinked. Wait, seriously? That was way too easy. Are you still drugged? I'm exhausted, bruised, and running on chamomile, she said, squeezing his hand. But I've always known who you are, Kelvin. And it was never about money. His heart nearly exploded. I love you, he said. I know, she whispered. Now shut up and let me sleep. He kissed her forehead and stayed by her side until morning. But peace wasn't permanent. Because while Deborah rested and Kelvin finally breathed again, someone else was making moves. Back at the college, Brandon Wexler sat in his father's study, nursing a swollen wrist and a bruised ego. You failed, his father said coldly. Brandon's jaw tightened. They showed up with a helicopter. What was I supposed to do, throw rocks? His father leaned back in his chair. No, son. You were supposed to win. Brandon didn't reply. I'm cutting you off, the man said. No more shielding. No more cleanup. You've made this family a joke. Brandon stood furious. You think I care? I don't need your money. Then prove it, his father said. Earn something. Brandon left the office seething. But outside, leaning against the wall, was someone unexpected. Preston. Bruised, bandaged, and smiling like someone with a secret. We're not done, Preston said. What are you talking about? Brandon growled. You really think this is over? Preston smirked. You think they won because of a helicopter and some legacy drama? Brandon narrowed his eyes. Then what's your plan? Preston leaned closer. Simple. We don't take them down with guns. We take them down with truth. Brandon scoffed. You don't know the truth. Preston's smile widened. Then maybe it's time we make one up. And just like that, the storm wasn't over. It was just changing form. I swear, Lillian muttered as she handed Deborah a mirror. If one more nurse pats you like you're a rescue puppy, I'm calling HR. Deborah smiled faintly as she inspected her bandaged eyebrow. Be honest. Do I look mysterious or just mugged? Lillian squinted. Somewhere between a tragic romance novel and a very expensive insurance commercial. Kelvin, standing by the window with a cup of hospital coffee he wasn't drinking, finally spoke. You look like you survived. That's what matters. Deborah looked at him and smiled, a soft, real one. I'm glad you found me. I'll always find you, he said, turning toward her. Even if it means kicking down cabin doors in the woods like a B-movie hero. Lillian snorted. Oh, please. You tripped over a carpet and nearly broke your hip on the way in. I was dramatically propelled by adrenaline, Kelvin said with mock offense. There's a difference. The girls laughed, and for the first time in days, the air in the room wasn't heavy with fear. Then Kelvin's phone buzzed. He checked it, then frowned. What's wrong? Deborah asked, already sitting up straighter. Kelvin stared at the screen. I'm trending. Lillian's eyes narrowed. Like, haircut trending or cancel culture trending? Kelvin's silence was answer enough. He tapped the screen and opened a link. There it was. A photo. Blurry but unmistakable. Kelvin and Deborah, together in the hospital corridor, moments before walking into her suite. Her head resting briefly on his shoulder. His hand at her back. And the caption in bold red. Cortez Heir dating former kidnapping suspect? Family responds with silence. Kelvin's heart dropped. Another article popped up seconds later. Scandal at Cortez estate. Billionaire son's romance sparks controversy following helicopter raid. A third headline screamed. Who is Deborah Vale? Meet the girl behind the Cortez family's new crisis. Lillian swore under her breath. This is not just gossip. This is strategy. Kelvin looked up. They're painting her as a suspect. And a gold digger, Deborah said quietly, her voice tight. Lillian slammed her hand on the table. They're trying to turn her into the villain of your story. Kelvin's jaw clenched. I know exactly who's behind this. Somewhere across town, in a dim studio lined with ring lights and ego, Preston Laird sipped his overpriced cold brew and grinned at the screen. I told you this would work, he said to Brandon, who stood off camera watching the chaos unfold. Brandon didn't smile. He just stared. Her face is everywhere, Preston continued. They'll dig through her past. That part-time job at the diner? Boom. Made to look like an inside job. That community protest she joined last year? Bet they spin it as radical behavior. Her being kidnapped? Just a performance to gain sympathy. Brandon finally spoke. You really think this'll crush him? Preston turned in his chair. Reputation, Brandon. That's where the rich bleed. Kelvin's weak spot isn't his fists, it's his image. He gave up the family name to chase love. All we have to do is make that love look like a threat. And what happens if the Cortezes fight back? We make it worse. Fake receipts. Edited videos. Anonymous testimonies. We've got bots, trolls, and influencers ready to eat this up. Brandon was quiet, then said, Good. But even as he agreed, a flicker of guilt twitched behind his eyes. Just a flicker. Back at the estate, Kelvin paced the war room like a man trying not to explode. Let me go public, he said. Gregory shook his head. No. I want to speak. You want to speak? Eleanor repeated, arms crossed. Like that'll magically undo headlines? Kelvin stopped pacing. She's being dragged through the mud because of me. She's being dragged because she's connected to the Cortez name, his mother corrected. And right now, that name is under siege. Ambrose Cortez, who had been silent until now, finally stood from his seat by the fireplace. Let him speak. Gregory turned sharply. Father. Ambrose raised a hand. He's not a boy anymore. And this isn't a scandal. It's war. Let him speak. Kelvin stepped forward, breath steady. I want it live. One take. No teleprompters. No lawyers breathing down my neck. You'll destroy your clean slate, Eleanor warned. Kelvin's voice was quiet but firm. I already lost that when Deborah got taken. Gregory nodded slowly. Then make it count. 12 hours later, the world watched. From corner offices in Dubai to college dorms in Kansas, millions tuned in as a single camera streamed a minimalist room. White walls, a black chair, and one man. Kelvin Cortez. No filters. No press backdrop. Just a face they thought they knew, speaking directly into their screens. My name is Kelvin Cortez, he began, and until recently, I was known for one thing, walking away. He paused. I walked away from a powerful family, from wealth, from an arranged engagement I didn't believe in. I chose something smaller. Simpler. I chose love. And I chose Deborah. He leaned in slightly. Let me be clear, Deborah Vale is not a criminal. She is not a gold digger. She is not a threat. She's the reason I became someone worth anything at all. His jaw tensed. She was kidnapped, tortured, humiliated, and now, she's being publicly shredded by people too cowardly to fight in the open. You know who you are. A long breath. This isn't about gossip. This is about dignity. And I won't stay silent while the people I love are hunted. Then softer. If you ever believed in me, at school, at work, online, then believe this, Deborah Vale is innocent. And I will protect her. The same way she protected me when I had nothing. He looked straight at the lens. We're done hiding. The screen cut to black. No logo. No hashtag. Just silence. But within minutes, the internet exploded. Hashtag I stand with Deborah. Hashtag Kelvin Cortez. Hashtag not a family name. Posts flooded in. That speech just ended careers. So this is why Brandon's been quiet. Imagine getting helicopter rescued and giving the most romantic speech of the decade. Even celebrities weighed in. An actor tweeted, Kelvin Cortez just taught a masterclass in owning your name without selling your soul. A famous author reposted the clip with the caption, If this isn't turned into a Netflix original, I riot. And somewhere in her hospital bed, Deborah wiped her eyes and whispered, That idiot. But she was smiling. Back in the studio, Preston stared at the screen as Kelvin's video played on loop. He wasn't smiling anymore. That wasn't supposed to work. Brandon watched, silent. The tide was turning. Fast. And for the first time, Preston looked nervous. You said we'd bury him. Brandon looked at him and said, You should have checked the soil first. At the Cortez estate, Kelvin returned from the studio to find Eleanor waiting in the hall. She didn't speak. Just looked at him. Then, finally, she said, That girl, she better be worth it. Kelvin replied, She's more than worth it. Then walked past her. And for once, Eleanor Cortez didn't follow. That night, Kelvin and Deborah sat on the estate balcony, stars scattered overhead like confetti. She wore a blanket over her shoulders. He handed her a bowl of ice cream. Mint chocolate chip, she said. The only acceptable flavor, he replied. They sat in silence, their hands brushing. Finally, Deborah said, You really gave a speech in front of the world for me. Technically, I just wanted to beat Preston at something. She leaned her head on his shoulder. You already did. And as the wind brushed past them and the city lights sparkled in the distance, Kelvin realized something. He hadn't just reclaimed his name. He'd rewritten what it meant. And the story was far from over. You ever taken a billionaire to a place with wobbly chairs and ketchup packets? That was Kelvin's half-joke as he opened the door for Deborah, a glint of mischief in his eyes. She stepped into the tiny diner, her eyebrows raised. You mean this is the place? The sign above had 3 flickering letters. The air smelled faintly of burnt toast and mop water, and the music was playing some low-energy jazz cover of a Beyoncé song. Kelvin nodded. This place got me through nights I couldn't afford cab fare or confidence. Deborah smiled and took a seat by the window. It's perfect. It was a place where no one wore a suit unless it was court-mandated, where you could buy dinner, dessert, and dignity for less than $5. The waitresses were seasoned, sharp-tongued, and poured coffee like it was currency. For Kelvin, it was once the closest thing to peace. He sat across from Deborah and scanned the room. A few college students in hoodies hunched over fries. 2 construction workers talked sports near the back. And behind the counter, with her usual side-eye and floral apron, was her Joyce. The woman who had once refused to let him leave without eating when his card got declined. Joyce spotted him, paused mid-pour, then blinked like someone seeing a ghost. Well, I'll be. Kelvin Cortez. Kelvin smiled. In the flesh. She waddled over, wiping her hands on her apron. You're on the news, you know. I thought that face looked familiar, but without the bruises and poverty. Deborah snorted. Kelvin laughed. Nice to see you too, Joyce. And you brought a date? She turned to Deborah and nodded in approval. Smart eyes. Strong jawline. You didn't settle. Deborah grinned. I'm the lucky one. Joyce leaned in. Sweetheart, if he doesn't pay for your pie, I know a guy with a food truck and a 6-pack who'd marry you on sight. As Joyce waddled off, muttering about whipped cream and romance, Kelvin leaned back and took in the moment. Here, at this simple plastic table, beneath a flickering bulb, beside a woman who had every reason to run, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Grounded. I used to sit right there, he said, pointing to a stool by the counter. Every Tuesday. 1 coffee, 1 grilled cheese. Joyce would throw in fries when I looked extra defeated. Deborah reached across the table and took his hand. I wish I'd known you then. He looked at her. I'm glad you didn't. Why? Because I was bitter. Angry. I thought the world owed me for walking away from my family. Turns out, it didn't. She squeezed his fingers. And now I know who I am. Because I had to find out without the Cortez name helping. He gestured around them. This place, it humbled me. A bell rang above the door. Kelvin turned and froze. Walking in, dressed in designer sneakers and smelling like arrogance and cologne, was Tyler Grant. One of the job recruiters who'd laughed in Kelvin's face when he found out he had no credentials, no connections, and no hope. Tyler stopped cold when he recognized Kelvin. Then his expression morphed into the most awkward smile money couldn't buy. Kelvin, he said, voice too high. Wow. Long time. Kelvin stood slowly. Tyler. Deborah's eyes flicked between them. I saw the press conference, Tyler continued, offering a hand Kelvin didn't take. Powerful stuff. Really. I always knew you had potential. Kelvin tilted his head. Did you? Because I remember you saying, and I quote, the only thing you're qualified for is disappointment. Tyler laughed nervously. I was young. Brutal. You know how it is. No, Kelvin said flatly. I know how you are. Tyler flushed. Well, hey, no hard feelings. Water under the bridge, right? Listen, if you're ever looking to invest in our startup. Kelvin smiled. It wasn't warm. Joyce, he called. She appeared, arms crossed. Could you bring my friend here a slice of humble pie? On me. Tyler turned red as the diner chuckled. He mumbled something and slinked away to a corner booth. Deborah leaned in. That was satisfying. Kelvin took a breath. More than I expected. But the warm moment didn't last. Because Kelvin's phone buzzed again. Another text. From someone unexpected. From Darius. Need to talk. Now. Don't tell anyone else. Meet me outside in 5. Kelvin's brows furrowed. Deborah noticed. Everything okay? He forced a smile. Just Darius. Wants to show me a meme or something. Should I worry? Only if it's another cat video. But his voice was too calm. Too rehearsed. Outside, the street was quiet. Cold. A breeze rustled the trash bins behind the diner. Darius stood by a black car, arms crossed, jaw tight. Something's wrong, Kelvin said as he approached. Darius nodded. You have no idea. What is it? Darius hesitated. The leak. What leak? The press leak. The hospital photos. The headlines. All of it. Kelvin's stomach turned. We already knew that was Preston and Brandon. No, Darius said. That was the second wave. The first leak, the one that led the media to Deborah's location in the first place, came from inside the Cortez estate. Kelvin's blood went cold. That's not possible. It is, Darius said. We traced the signal. Someone on the internal network. Someone with clearance. Kelvin took a step back. Who? Darius pulled out a phone and showed the screen. The name on the file made Kelvin's breath catch. Harriet Vale. Deborah's aunt. Kelvin's heart slammed into his ribs. No, that's not right. She loves Deborah. Maybe, Darius said. Or maybe someone paid her to forget. Kelvin turned away, head spinning. Does Deborah know? No. Then we keep it that way, until I speak to Harriet myself. Darius placed a hand on his shoulder. Kel, this isn't about family anymore. This is about survival. If Deborah's own blood turned on her, we need to ask why. Kelvin's jaw clenched. I will. Back in the diner, Deborah watched Kelvin through the window. He looked shattered. Lillian had arrived and now sat across from her, picking at fries. He doesn't look okay, Lillian said. Deborah nodded slowly. He's hiding something. From you. From both of us. Lillian hesitated. You don't think he regrets it? Us. No, Deborah said instantly. If anything, he's afraid we'll regret him. Lillian reached across the table and squeezed her friend's hand. No one could regret a man who brought a helicopter to a gunfight. They both laughed. But outside, Kelvin stared into the distance, wondering how deep the betrayal went, and what it would cost them next. Because someone inside his circle had opened the gates. And now, the wolves were already on the move. You're here to yell at me, aren't you? That was the first thing Harriet Vale said as Kelvin stepped onto the porch of her garden home. A neat little cottage tucked behind a wall of ivy and good intentions. Kelvin didn't smile. He didn't speak. Just stared. Harriet sighed, brushing dirt off her gloves. I figured this was coming. Come in. The roses won't mind the interruption. He followed her inside. The air smelled of lavender and secrets. Family photos lined the mantel. Deborah as a child, wide-eyed and gap-toothed, hugging a golden retriever that looked smarter than most politicians. Kelvin scanned them all, his jaw clenched. I trusted you, he finally said. Harriet paused at the kettle. And I trusted the world not to devour good people. But here we are. Don't deflect. I'm not. He stepped forward. You leaked her location. You exposed her. You gave them the weapon they needed. She poured tea as if the room wasn't spinning. I didn't sell her out. I tried to protect her. Kelvin laughed bitterly. By letting the media attack her like wolves? Harriet placed the cup on the table, porcelain clinking. You think this started when she met you? You think the world just woke up and decided to hate her? No. They've been waiting for a crack. All I did was give them something small, so they wouldn't come digging for something worse. Kelvin blinked. What could possibly be worse? Harriet didn't answer. She just looked away. And that silence felt heavier than any accusation. Tell me, he demanded. Her lips trembled. She's not who you think she is. Kelvin's fists clenched. You don't get to rewrite her story now. I'm not. I'm trying to save her. She doesn't need saving. She needs truth. Harriet sat down. Then sit. Because the truth is going to wreck you both. Back at the estate, Deborah was pacing the terrace like a lioness with unfinished business. Lillian sat on a lounge chair, flipping through online articles. You're still trending, by the way. Wonderful, Deborah muttered. Any chance I'm not being labeled a manipulative opportunist today? Lillian checked again. Let's see. Nope. Still being accused of staging your own kidnapping to win Kelvin's sympathy and power. Deborah groaned. People really believe that? People believe the earth is flat, and that cereal is soup. Logic doesn't live on the internet. She finally sat beside Lillian and exhaled hard. I hate this. I hate hiding. I hate the cameras. I hate the whispers. Lillian handed her a can of soda. You hate losing control. Deborah sipped, nodding. Exactly. You know what helps? What? Taking it back. Deborah tilted her head. How? Lillian grinned. Let's throw a grenade into their rumor mill. Meanwhile, at Harriet's cottage, Kelvin stared into his tea like it might solve all the mysteries at once. Harriet's voice was soft. Before your family showed up, Deborah was already under watch. Kelvin looked up. By who? Harriet hesitated. Her father. Kelvin blinked. I thought her father left years ago. He did. But not completely. Harriet walked to a drawer and pulled out a folder. I never showed her this, she said, handing it over. But you need to know. Because if he's still out there, if he's involved with this smear campaign, then it's not about Deborah and you. Kelvin flipped open the folder. Photos. Letters. Surveillance notes. A man in sunglasses, always watching from a distance. A different name. A new ID. But the same eyes. Deborah's eyes. Kelvin's pulse quickened. Why didn't you tell her? Because he's dangerous. He's clever. And if she found him, she'd go after him. Just like her mother did. Kelvin stood, pacing. So you leaked her location to what, draw him out? Harriet nodded. I thought if he saw her in danger, he'd show his face. He doesn't care about much. But her? That's his blood. Kelvin rubbed his temples. This just got so much worse. Harriet stepped forward. I didn't mean to hurt her. Kelvin looked at her, eyes burning. Then don't let her find out from someone else. And he walked out. Deborah was in the media room, pacing again when Kelvin returned. She spun the moment he stepped in. Where have you been? I went to see Harriet. Her expression fell. Did she tell you? Kelvin paused. Tell me what? Deborah swallowed hard. About my father. He froze. You knew. Not everything. But enough to know I wasn't born into simplicity. She sat down, pulling her knees to her chest. He was charming. Handsome. And a liar. He walked out before I turned 10. My mom told me he was gone for good. Harriet always gave me looks when I brought him up, but she never said much. Kelvin sat beside her. Why didn't you say anything? Because I didn't want him to define me. Or scare you away. Kelvin took her hand. Nothing scares me away. Not anymore. She leaned on his shoulder. I hate that he's part of this. That he might be pulling strings from the shadows. Kelvin nodded. Then let's yank the curtain back. 3 days later, Deborah and Lillian launched The Storm. A live stream. Unsponsored. Unfiltered. No script. Just two women sitting in the courtyard of the estate, drinks in hand, facing the world. Hi, Deborah said. If you're watching this, you've probably read 20 different lies about me this week. Lillian chimed in. At least 2 said she was a lizard in disguise. Very creative. Deborah continued. I'm not here to argue with trolls. I'm here to remind you that real people bleed. And real stories matter. They shared everything. The kidnapping, the recovery, the love. They didn't paint themselves as perfect. Just human. And by the end, the world had shifted. Not because they were loud, but because they were real. Back in the shadows of the digital world, someone watched the video with a cold smile. He sat in a penthouse, cigar lit, hands tapping the desk. Well played, princess, he murmured. A knock on the door. A woman entered. Sir, she said. The boy's next move? He smirked. Let's see how Cortez handles losing everything he's rebuilt. The headlines hadn't stopped. Even after Deborah's live stream with Lillian went viral, even after public support started pouring in, the smear campaign didn't die, it evolved. New whispers. New targets. This time, they weren't coming for Deborah. They were coming for Kelvin. Cortez heir tied to hidden trust scandal. Anonymous source alleges fraud at Cortez Foundation. Kelvin Cortez accused of hiding wealth offshore. Romance or distraction? Kelvin sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the TV screen, jaw tight. The broadcast was a circus, bright graphics, dramatic voices, sound bites with no truth. A panel of experts debated whether he was hiding a second life. One even suggested Deborah was in on it. He turned off the screen. Silence returned like a curtain drop. His heart pounded, not because he was guilty, but because he knew exactly what was happening. This was precision sabotage. Engineered chaos. Whoever was behind it wasn't after clicks. They were after blood. There was a soft knock on the door. Kelvin, her voice. He looked up. Come in. Deborah stepped in wearing one of his old college hoodies. Oversized, faded, with a tiny tear on the left sleeve. She looked like comfort wrapped in a memory. I saw the news, she said gently. Kelvin nodded. It's ridiculous. I know, but it's working. She crossed the room, barefoot, and sat beside him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just sat in the stillness. Then Kelvin broke. I'm trying so hard to do the right thing, Debs. To protect you. To own who I am. And it still feels like I'm losing. She reached for his hand. You're not losing. Feels like it. You're fighting. That's different. Her fingers laced with his, warm and steady. He looked down at their hands, then up at her. I don't know how this ends, he admitted. But I know I can't do it if I lose you. You won't. You say that like it's a fact. Because it is. And then slowly Deborah leaned in. Her forehead rested against his, her breath soft against his lips. I don't care about the name, she whispered. Or the money. Or the mess. I care about you. His hand came up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered at her cheek, gentle, reverent. She closed her eyes. And he kissed her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was anchored, a deep, full, quiet kiss that said more than any press conference ever could. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer as she melted into him, one arm wrapping around his neck, the other pressed against his chest. Their lips moved in perfect rhythm, like the world outside didn't exist. Like time paused to give them this. When they finally parted breathless, she rested her head against his shoulder and whispered, That's the only truth I need. Kelvin held her tighter. And for a few precious minutes, they just stayed like that, entwined, steady, safe. Later that night, in the estate's security room, Darius stared at a screen. Red alerts blinked across the interface. He leaned forward, brows furrowed. Someone's breached the Foundation's donation database. The technician beside him tapped keys furiously. They're planting fake entries, making it look like Kelvin funneled money into a private equity shell. Darius's jaw tightened. Can you trace it? I can try. He reached for his phone. Dialed Kelvin. No answer. He tried again. Still no answer. He cursed under his breath. Kid, this is not the night to be making out. In a quiet hallway near the east wing, Kelvin walked hand in hand with Deborah. It was nearly midnight. Moonlight poured through the floor-length windows. They walked barefoot, just like they used to on the beach. No reporters. No flashbulbs. Just them. They paused near a glass sculpture, a twisting spiral that sparkled with embedded lights. Kelvin looked at her. You know this was commissioned by a prince? She raised an eyebrow. A real prince or a Vegas prince? Real. He cried when it arrived. Thought it looked like his ex-wife's heart. Deborah laughed. Now I like it even more. He turned to face her fully. I want more of this. She stepped closer. Of what? Us. Quiet. Real. Away from the madness. You think we'll ever get that? We can build it. She leaned in. Together? He nodded. Always. She kissed him again, this time softer, slower. His hands slid around her back, pulling her flush against him as her arms looped around his neck. It wasn't about fire. It was about belonging. A kiss that said, we made it through the fire, and we're still here. They only broke apart when Darius's voice came over the hidden intercom in the wall. Kelvin. Deborah. Sorry to kill the vibe, but we've got a real problem. They both froze. Meet me in the security room. Now. Minutes later, they rushed into the war room, Kelvin's shirt buttoned wrong, Deborah still wearing his hoodie. Darius spun in his chair. The smear campaign just leveled up. He turned the monitor. It showed a breaking news story. Breaking. Cortez Foundation accused of international fraud. Anonymous insider claims documents prove Kelvin's involvement. Under it, a leaked spreadsheet showing fake transactions from a Cortez Relief Trust to a private offshore account registered in Kelvin's name. Kelvin's mouth dropped. That's not even real. I know, Darius said. But it's convincing. Deborah stepped forward. Who did this? Darius pulled up a trace log. It was routed through 6 countries. But we tracked the origin. He clicked. A profile popped up. And the name made everyone go still. Jeremy O'Neill. Kelvin's fists clenched. He's back. Darius nodded. And he's playing for keeps. Deborah whispered, he's not working alone. Kelvin looked at her. What do you mean? She hesitated. The man I saw the night I was taken, the one giving orders, wasn't Jeremy. He was older. Sharper. Said he knew my father. Silence. Then Darius said, then we need to move faster. Kelvin's voice was hard. Let's end this. But Deborah reached for his arm. Not yet. He turned. Why? She looked him in the eye. Because they want you angry. They want you reactive. That's how they win. He studied her for a long moment. Then nodded. Okay, he said. Then we fight smarter. Darius smirked. Now you're sounding like a Cortez. Outside the estate, a car idled under the trees. Inside, Jeremy O'Neill stared at a burner phone. The voice on the other end was calm. You moved too soon. Jeremy scowled. The files are out. The media is taking the bait. The Cortezes are smarter than you think. I don't care how smart they are, Jeremy said. This ends with Kelvin broke, humiliated, and alone. There was a pause. Then the voice said, fine. But next time, let me pull the trigger. And the call ended. Jeremy stared into the dark. And smiled. Deborah had always imagined the day she might see her father again. Maybe in a crowd. Maybe in a courtroom. Maybe standing behind glass with regret in his eyes. She never imagined it would be in broad daylight. On a sidewalk. Across from a flower shop. Holding a cup of coffee like the world hadn't ended 15 years ago. There, she whispered, barely audible, pressing her fingers to the tinted glass of the car window. Kelvin leaned forward from the passenger seat. Darius, in the driver's seat, stayed quiet. That's him? Darius asked. Deborah's breath caught. I remember the way he walks. That's him. Arthur Vale. The man who vanished when she was 10. Who left her mother crying on the kitchen floor, credit cards frozen, bills unpaid. Who promised to take her to the amusement park and instead took off with half a trust fund and someone else's identity. Kelvin's jaw flexed. What do you want to do? Deborah's eyes never left the figure on the street. I want to talk to him. Kelvin hesitated. Are you sure? She reached for the door handle. No. And she got out. Arthur didn't notice her at first. He was leaning against a lamp post, phone in one hand, coffee in the other, watching cars go by. His face was thinner than she remembered. Hair grayer. Shoulders not quite as broad. But the eyes? Same. Piercing. Intelligent. And cold. Hi, Dad. He turned. At first, he didn't react. Just blinked, like his brain needed time to process the ghost standing in front of him. Then, softly and too casually, he said, Debbie? No one calls me that anymore. He smiled. It wasn't warm. Well, this is unexpected. She crossed her arms. Is it? Or did you think your name would stay buried forever? He took a slow sip of his coffee. I figured I had a few more years before the past caught up. Well, she said, voice sharp, I accelerated the schedule. Silence stretched between them. Then he said, you've grown. People do that. And you're with Cortez now. That's quite the leap. She stepped closer. You tried to ruin that. Arthur chuckled. I barely lifted a finger. But Jeremy did. His eyes flicked. Jeremy's an idiot. I needed a public distraction. He volunteered to be loud. You sold me out, she said quietly. Like a headline. Like I wasn't even real. I protected you. She blinked. You what? Arthur stepped toward her. If I hadn't leaked your location, the real wolves would have found you first. Jeremy wanted chaos. I gave him something to distract him. You gave him me. I gave him time, Arthur corrected. While we built the next move. Deborah stared, breath shallow. There is no we. Arthur's voice lowered. You think you're safe with the Cortezes? They'll use you. Just like I used to. That's what power does. She stepped back. I'm nothing like you. He smiled again. No. You're better. She wanted to scream. To cry. To hit something. Instead, she said, don't come near me again. He tilted his head. You'll be back. Sooner or later, blood always comes home. Deborah turned and walked away. She didn't look back. But she heard him say, I left to save you, Deborah. You'll understand that one day. Back in the car, Kelvin watched her climb in, wordless. Darius started the engine. No one spoke until they were halfway back to the estate. Then Deborah whispered, he still thinks he's the hero. Kelvin reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. I'm sorry, he said. I'm not, she replied. Now I know who we're really fighting. Meanwhile, at Cortez Tower, Ambrose Cortez was tearing through reports like a man building a legal army. Kelvin burst into the conference room with Darius and a hard drive in hand. I want to strike back, he said. Not on Twitter. In court. Ambrose looked up, intrigued. With what? Kelvin placed the drive on the table. Proof. A Cortez tech team traced Jeremy's money trail. He's been using a shell company tied to a defunct charity. The one that my foundation is being falsely accused of laundering through. Darius added, if we go public with this, Jeremy burns. But if we time it right, we burn the whole network behind him. Kelvin looked at his grandfather, including Arthur Vale. Ambrose's fingers tapped the desk. You sure you're ready for that? Kelvin's voice didn't shake. I was born ready. I just didn't know it then. Ambrose stood. Then let's clean house. That night, Deborah stood on the balcony, wind in her hair, arms wrapped around herself. Kelvin joined her quietly. "Cold?" he asked. "A little." He slid his jacket over her shoulders. She leaned against him, eyes on the moon. "I used to think the world was simpler," she said. "Good and bad. Right and wrong." He rested his chin on her head. "It's not. I know that now." They stood there for a while, just breathing. Then she turned to him. "You're the only part of this story I trust." He cupped her face. "Then write it with me." She nodded slowly. And they kissed again, this time fierce, full, unspoken promises woven between every breath. No cameras. No interruptions. Just hearts finding each other in the storm. Elsewhere, Jeremy O'Neill sat in a club booth, sipping champagne. He didn't see the two men approaching. Didn't recognize them until one flashed a Cortez crest on a tablet. He froze. "What's this?" "Your notice," the man said calmly. "Cortez legal team just filed a motion with federal court. You've got 24 hours before this goes public." Jeremy's voice cracked. "You can't do this." "We're not doing anything," the man replied. "You did it to yourself." And they walked away. Jeremy's phone buzzed. One message. "Arthur, you're on your own." Jeremy stared at the screen. And for the first time, he looked scared. Rain was falling, not the soft, romantic kind, but the type that slapped windows and smeared city lights like angry brushstrokes. Inside the black Cortez SUV, Kelvin sat in silence. His eyes locked on the steps of the courthouse. Crowds were already forming beyond the barricades. Paparazzi, protesters, curious citizens, and vultures dressed as reporters. The kind of chaos that made headlines before truth had time to stretch its legs. Deborah reached over, slipping her hand into his. "You don't have to do this alone," she said. Kelvin looked at her, drenched in light from the dashboard. "I don't feel alone," he whispered. She leaned in and kissed him softly, just a breath of closeness. "Then go in there and make them regret ever thinking you were weak." Inside the courthouse, Kelvin stood behind a podium flanked by lawyers, PR officers, and the Cortez crest projected behind him. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. He raised a hand, waited for quiet. Then he began. "3 weeks ago, someone tried to erase everything I built. They attacked my name, my foundation, my family, and they did it thinking I'd stay quiet." He paused. "I won't." He held up the drive. "This device contains every fraudulent transaction planted in my name. It also traces them back to the shell companies, the offshore accounts, and the people responsible. Jeremy O'Neill, and those he worked with." A murmur went through the room. Kelvin continued. "But this isn't just about clearing my name. It's about reclaiming control from people who think money gives them a license to destroy." He turned slightly. "To those who fed these lies, to those who watched my girlfriend get dragged through hell just to score political points." He looked directly at one camera. "This is your eviction notice." The Cortez lawyers stepped forward, handing out preloaded drives to federal agents, journalists, and regulators. The press conference was over in 15 minutes. But its aftershock would last for years. Back at the estate, Deborah watched it all unfold on a private monitor. Lillian sat beside her, eating popcorn like it was an action movie. He dropped that speech like a mic wrapped in barbed wire. Deborah smiled, eyes glassy. "He's not just fighting for himself anymore," she said. "Nope. He's fighting for you. For us. For that hoodie you keep stealing from his closet." They laughed. But the smile on Deborah's face faded as she glanced at the envelope in her lap. A letter. No return address. Just one word, handwritten in sharp ink. "Daughter." Lillian noticed. "What's that?" Deborah opened it. Inside, a photograph of her mother. Smiling. Young. Alive. On the back, a scribbled note. "You deserve to know the truth about her death." "Hey." Deborah's fingers trembled. Lillian frowned. "That doesn't look like a threat. It looks like bait." Deborah stood. "I'm going to find out what really happened." Meanwhile, Jeremy O'Neill was being escorted out of his luxury condo in handcuffs. His face was red, his tie undone. Reporters crowded around the elevator lobby as the agents pushed through. He shouted at the cameras. "I was framed. The Cortez family set me up. You'll all see." No one listened, because by now the narrative had shifted. Kelvin wasn't the villain anymore. Jeremy was. And no amount of screaming could change it. 2 hours later, in an abandoned marina across town, Kelvin stood in the rain facing a man with a limp and eyes like storm clouds. Arthur Vale. Deborah wasn't there. He hadn't told her about this meeting. Because some monsters didn't deserve the chance to hurt her again. Arthur lit a cigarette and leaned on a rusted shipping container. "You're braver than I expected," he said. "I'm not here for admiration," Kelvin replied. "Then why come alone?" Kelvin stepped closer. "Because I wanted to see the face of a man who destroyed the woman I love, and still thinks he's clever." Arthur flicked ash into a puddle. She was never supposed to get pulled into this. She was supposed to grow up safe. Quiet. Anonymous. Then you shouldn't have abandoned her. Arthur looked at him. "You think I left for fun?" Her mother, my wife, was being hunted. I made a deal to disappear so Deborah wouldn't be used as leverage. Kelvin paused. "Is that true?" Arthur exhaled. "Does it matter? She hates me now anyway." Kelvin stared. "You don't get points for survival if the cost was her soul." Arthur's eyes flashed. "You know nothing about sacrifice." "I know everything about love." "Then leave her out of this." Kelvin's voice dropped to a whisper. "I can't. She's in it. She is it." Arthur didn't speak. Just stood there. Wet. Angry. Empty. "I came here to tell you something," Kelvin said, stepping back. "You lost. Not in court. Not in headlines. But in her heart." And he walked away. That night, Deborah sat in the old reading room of the estate. The photograph still clutched in her hand. Kelvin entered quietly. "I met him," he said. She looked up. "Where?" "At the marina." She stood. "You shouldn't have gone alone." "I had to. For me." He held out a small envelope. "What's that?" "A piece of your mother's case file. From my family's archives." Darius pulled it quietly. She opened it slowly. Inside, a report. Not suicide. Not overdose. Murder. Cold. Covered up. Paid for. Deborah's voice trembled. He didn't leave to protect himself. He left because someone silenced her. Kelvin nodded. "And now we know who." Her eyes filled. "Will it ever end?" He stepped closer. Pulled her into his arms. Held her. "No," he whispered. "But we'll end it together." She wrapped her arms around him, burying her face into his chest. He held her like she might disappear if he didn't. They stood like that for a long time. No words, just heartbeats sinking like battle drums before the final fight. He leaned down, kissed her forehead, then her cheek. Then her lips. Slow. Fierce. Unbreakable. Because this war wasn't just his anymore. It was theirs. There are moments that change the weather of your soul. Standing at the edge of her mother's grave, with rain licking her cheeks like the breath of ghosts, Deborah Vale felt the sky rearrange inside her chest. Not grief. Not even rage. But resolve. "I used to bring daisies here," she whispered. Kelvin stood behind her, silent under the umbrella, watching the way her hands trembled as she knelt to place a single white lily at the headstone. "She likes simple things," Deborah said. "And the world never let her have them." Kelvin knelt beside her, not to speak, but to share the weight. She looked at him, eyes wild with a fire he hadn't seen before. "He took her life," she said. "And someone paid him to do it." Kelvin nodded once. "We find out who." Back at the Cortez estate, the war room pulsed with energy. Darius stood by the smartboard, lines of data crawling behind him like digital veins. "There's a name that keeps showing up in the background," he said, pointing to a blurry surveillance photo from a gala 17 years ago. "A man with a cane. Always watching. Always present." "Who is he?" Deborah asked. Darius pulled up another file. Milo Renner. Former intelligence contractor. Disappeared off the grid a decade ago. But before that, he was tied to hush ops for high-net-worth families. Damage control. Disappearances. Kelvin leaned forward. "He's the fixer." Darius nodded. "If your mother was silenced, Milo was the hand." "And the client?" Deborah asked, voice like steel. Darius hesitated. "That's the part we're still digging through." Kelvin stood. "Then we're wasting time." Deborah joined him. "Let's go find him." Darius arched a brow. "You don't find Milo. He finds you." Kelvin met his gaze. "Then we make him want to find us." The trap was elegant. They staged a leak. Just enough digital breadcrumbs to suggest Kelvin was about to release a memoir titled What the Cortezes Buried. Within an hour, encrypted chatter picked up on private servers. Within 2, the name Milo Renner reappeared in flagged forums. And by dawn, a burner phone rang in Darius's coat pocket. One word. Meet. The abandoned train station was straight out of a Cold War film. Iron arches, shattered glass, and wind whispering secrets to no one. Kelvin and Deborah arrived first. No guards. No weapons. Just honesty and bait. At 7:02 a.m., Milo stepped out of the fog. Gray coat, silver beard, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "I thought you'd be older," he said to Kelvin. "I thought you'd be taller," Kelvin replied. Milo almost smiled. "Why the theatrics?" Deborah asked. Milo looked at her, and something shifted. Regret. Recognition. "You have your mother's eyes," he said. "Did you see them before or after you killed her?" Deborah fired. Silence cracked through the station. Milo didn't flinch. "I didn't pull the trigger. I just arranged the silencing." Deborah stepped forward. "Tell me who paid you." Milo paused. "Arthur Vale." Kelvin blinked. "Her father?" Milo shook his head. "No. He was the decoy. The signature on the contract came from someone much higher. Someone with more to lose." Deborah's voice quivered. "Then say it." Milo stepped closer. "The Cortez board. Not your grandfather. Not your father. But the board that controlled the empire's public image. Your mother had information. About illegal land transfers. Early bribery. They thought she'd talk." Kelvin felt like the floor dropped beneath him. "Why would the board do that behind my family's back?" he asked. "Because even in a clean empire," Milo said, "the rats live in the basement." Deborah's voice cracked. "So they killed her. And framed your father for running," Milo said. "I was ordered to make sure no one ever looked deeper." "But now we are," Kelvin said. Milo nodded. "And if I help you finish it, my name disappears. Forever." Kelvin didn't blink. "Done." Milo stepped back into the fog. "I'll send what I have. Use it wisely. It will burn half your board to the ground." Then he was gone. Hours later, the documents arrived in a black envelope. Inside, scanned contracts, surveillance logs, board meeting recordings. All pointing to one name. Beatrice Langford. Cortez board chair. Public philanthropist. Kelvin's godmother. Deborah stared at the file. "She came to my scholarship dinner." Kelvin swallowed hard. "She told me I was her second son." Darius entered the room. "She's on a plane. Headed to Geneva. Probably running." Kelvin grabbed his jacket. "Then we go to the airfield." They intercepted her at the private jet hangar. Beatrice was wearing sunglasses, pearls, and the kind of calm that only the dangerously guilty possess. "I knew this would come," she said. Kelvin stepped in front of her. "You lied to me. You buried my mother. You used my name." Beatrice sighed. "We kept the empire clean. You think it runs on family brunches and corporate ethics." Deborah stepped beside him. "It could, if people like you stopped poisoning it." Beatrice took off her glasses. "I liked your mother, but she wanted to blow everything up. You want to protect the Cortez legacy? Then bury this." Kelvin's voice was razor sharp. "No, we expose it, and rebuild it in her name." She laughed. "You'll destroy your own brand." He leaned in. "Then I'll build a better one." Police sirens wailed in the distance. Beatrice turned pale. "You called the cops?" she whispered. Darius appeared behind her, smiling. "Oh no." She did. Deborah raised her phone, still recording. "I'm done being quiet." As the officers cuffed Beatrice and walked her away, Kelvin turned to Deborah. "You did it." She smiled. "We did." That night, the estate was quiet. Kelvin lit 2 candles in the memorial hall. One for his mother, one for Deborah's. She stood beside him, hands in her coat pockets. "I never knew peace could feel like this," she whispered. He looked at her. "It's not peace." She turned. "No, it's justice." And then he kissed her. Long. Sure. Slow. Like a man who'd earned his way back to breathing. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I want to start a new foundation. In her name." Deborah smiled. "What will you call it?" Kelvin held her hands. "The Veil." And she whispered, "Let's build it together." 6 months later. The city had changed. Or maybe it hadn't. Maybe the skyline still carved its cold geometry across the horizon the same way, and it was Kelvin who had shifted. Wider in heart, stronger in spine, and finally free of the weight he never chose to carry. The Cortez name wasn't just famous now, it was redefined. And it had nothing to do with mansions or money. It had everything to do with truth. The scandal burned fast and wide. Beatrice Langford was indicted on 6 counts of obstruction, conspiracy, and fraud. For other board members were swept out like dust beneath the marble floors of the empire they'd tried to protect with lies. The public response? Shock. Then awe. Then admiration. Because when the dust cleared, Kelvin didn't run. He stood taller. And beside him always was Deborah Vale. The foundation launch was held at the same estate where it all started, but transformed. The garden was open to the public. Street kids in sneakers sat beside CEOs in tailored suits. There were no velvet ropes, no VIP-only tents. Just long tables, shared food, live music, and peace. The Veil Foundation didn't raise money through auctions or influence. It raised money through honesty. Real people. Real causes. A new way forward. Deborah stood in front of the crowd, holding a microphone with steady hands and clear eyes. She looked different now. Not because of the tailored navy dress or the quiet elegance that clung to her like confidence, but because the fear was gone. She had nothing left to hide. My mother believed in truth, she said. She died for it. But today she lives in it. And in every woman, child, and man we help from this day forward, so will she. Applause rippled through the crowd. She smiled and looked over to Kelvin. He stood by the fountain, hands in his pockets, watching her with eyes that held entire galaxies of love. Darius elbowed him from the side. You really gonna wait all night to do it? Kelvin blinked. Do what? Darius raised a brow. You're holding a ring box in your pocket like it's radioactive. Kelvin smirked. That obvious? Man, the koi fish noticed. Later that evening, after the lights dimmed and the guests thinned, Kelvin led Deborah to the far end of the garden, where the stars dared to shine a little brighter. They stood near the tree they planted in her mother's name, a Japanese maple with crimson leaves and roots stubborn enough to break stone. She looked up at him. What now? He didn't answer with words. He pulled the ring box from his pocket and dropped to one knee. Her breath caught. He opened it. Simple. Elegant. Timeless. Like her. Deborah Vale, he said, voice steadier than it had ever been. You loved me when I had nothing. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And now that the storm has passed. He paused. Smiled. I want to build the sunlight with you. Tears filled her eyes. Not out of shock. Not out of nerves. But out of knowing. Because somewhere deep inside, she always knew this was where their story was going. Yes, she whispered. And the kiss that followed wasn't fireworks or fury. It was home. Later that week, a reporter asked Kelvin during a televised interview, if you could go back to when everyone thought you were poor, would you change anything? Kelvin smiled. No, he said. Because that version of me, the broken, stubborn college student, that's the one who found the real treasure. And what was that? Kelvin looked straight into the camera. Her. A year later, in a small classroom in Lagos, Nigeria, a 10-year-old girl stared at a plaque on the wall. It read, Donated by the Veil Foundation, because every child deserves a future. She looked at her teacher. Who's Deborah Vale? The teacher smiled. She was once nobody, then somebody, then a voice for everybody. The girl blinked. Like a superhero? Exactly like that. And somewhere across the sea, on a quiet balcony overlooking the city she helped reshape, Deborah Vale sat beside her husband, sipping tea barefoot, notebook in her lap, writing the next chapter. Not of her life, but of the world she was helping to heal. One truth at a time. Like, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification.